All right, so our first speaker in the next session is Lorraine Hilton, who is Special Representative for Commercial and Business Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. And Lorraine has a very distinguished and diversified career. She took her MBA at Harvard. She worked for IBM. She's been CEO of her own company, and now serving in the U.S. State Department. She's particularly important for our purposes in talking about the entrepreneurship imperative, I should say, because she launched the Global Entrepreneurship Program, the GEP, and the GEP is a U.S. State Department effort to promote and spur entrepreneurship around the world. So with her background in the private sector and now in the public sector, I think she's going to have a lot of very useful insights on how we can develop the ecosystem in the region to facilitate the emergence and acceleration of more entrepreneurs. And then following her, I'll introduce our second speaker, Jim Clifton from Gallup. But first of all, let's give a warm welcome to Lorraine Hilton. Thank you.
Good morning. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you today at GCF. I'd like to thank the organizers for their kind invitation, and I look forward to a productive discussion with both the distinguished panelists and the esteemed audience members here today. And I invite the ladies on the other side of the panel to be very active in the discussion as well. I'd also like to thank our exceptional team at Embassy Riyadh who have worked tirelessly to make my visit a success. I commend you and appreciate all your efforts on behalf of the United States of America. Today's panel, The Coming Jobs War, is a future statement. I challenge this idea. It is a present statement. In effect, I believe that the jobs war is already here, and it has been for some time. The Arab Spring highlighted for all the pressing need for job creation among youth in this region. And many of the world's most developed nations are struggling with this same challenge. Job creation is one of President Obama's top priorities. We have a number of programs across the United States government and at the State Department, where I work. We are focused on job creation both in the United States and around the world. U.S. government initiatives for job creation include the National Export Initiative, which President Obama announced as part of his State of the Union address in 2010. This ambitious program sets a goal of doubling U.S. exports by the end of 2014 to create 2 million jobs in the United States. Select USA, which is aimed at helping attract foreign investment in the United States, is another initiative. And I will tell you, the U.S. is definitely open for business. In fact, one of the most interesting things that I did in my current job was to go to Calvert, Alabama to launch the opening of the first greenfield steel plant in the United States by ThyssenKrupp, which employed 3,000 steel workers. So we encourage you all to consider the United States for investment. And the next initiative, Startup America, was announced by the President Obama last year to enable the United States government and the private sector to work together to foster innovative job growth. This program ensures that U.S. government regulations, incentives, and other programs are aligned to support the entrepreneur. However, job creation is not a zero-sum game. We can all be winners. As the United States seeks to create jobs back at home, we also support job creation in emerging economies. Entrepreneurship is the backbone of job creation. It is a win-win for all of us. In fact, according to the Kaufman Foundation, almost all net new jobs in the United States over the past 10 years have been created by companies under 5 years old. Entrepreneurship and its cousin, innovation, underpins economic health, political stability, and civil society. This is why entrepreneurship is becoming an increasingly important component of the State Department's economic statecraft agenda. This is so critical today because, unfortunately, employment prospects are not keeping pace with the youth population in many countries. According to the International Labor Organization, the unemployment rate for 15 to 24-year-olds was over 13% in 2009, the highest level on record. Over 81 million of the world's 620 million economically active youth are unemployed. The region of the world with the highest rate of youth unemployment, over 23%, was the Middle East and North Africa. In Saudi Arabia, an estimated 65% of the population is under 25. I have heard that Saudi Arabia may need to create as many as 3 million new jobs for its young population over the next 10 years. The ILO also reported that skills training for young entrepreneurs is one of the most valuable investments for countries with scarce employment prospects. Because of our history and culture, the United States has developed a well-earned reputation for building successful entrepreneurial ecosystems and has achieved some success in encouraging and commercializing innovation that leads to the startup of new businesses. As a result, the United States has taken great strides to promote entrepreneurship and help countries improve the ecosystem for entrepreneurs. As one measure of this effort, as John mentioned, Secretary Clinton launched the Global Entrepreneurship Program, or GEP, in April 2010 at the Presidential Summit on Entrepreneurship. The GEP is now part of the office that I run at the State Department. The GEP promotes entrepreneurial activities globally through our embassies and consulates. One approach we've used successfully is to place entrepreneur in residence on the ground, as we have done in Egypt, Indonesia, and Turkey. This allows expert entrepreneurs to encourage and assist startup companies directly by leveraging the efforts of our growing base of 125 partners around the world. Programs are focused on 6 areas: identifying entrepreneurs, training them, providing access to capital, sustaining them through mentorship and access to resources, developing the enabling environment, and celebrating their successes. Another mechanism we have used with great success in the GEP is to organize entrepreneurial delegations to meet with promising entrepreneurs in the country. Last fall, I led a delegation to Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. The delegation consisted of 15 U.S. diaspora entrepreneurs, early-stage investors, and academics. Our delegation met with promising startups, provided hands-on training, and discussed future partnerships possibilities. In fact, I just came from a follow-on conference on entrepreneurship held in Morocco that boasted speakers and government representatives from throughout North Africa and the United States. Last month, I attended the 2nd Annual Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Istanbul, hosted by the Turkish Prime Minister. This was the first follow-on to the Presidential Summit on Entrepreneurship hosted by President Obama in Washington, D.C. in April 2010. Our Vice President, Joe Biden, opened the summit to a crowd of over 3,000 participants from over 30 countries. During the opening ceremony, UAE Minister of Economy announced that the UAE would be hosting the third annual Global Entrepreneurship Summit this fall as part of Global Entrepreneurship Week. The Department of State sponsored Global Innovation Through Science and Technology, or GIST initiative, is empowering young scientists and technology entrepreneurs to turn innovative ideas into new products, companies, and jobs. GIST leverages a network of partners to implement skills development programs and incentive-based competitions that identify, support, and finance high-potential tech startups through the Muslim world. And one area of mutual interest and of great importance to the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, is promoting women entrepreneurship. We know from the work we've done around the world that no country can prosper who leaves half of its population behind. We call women forced multipliers because when we invest in women, their success translates to success for their children, their families, their communities, and ultimately their countries. Our experiences is that women are both capable and motivated to become drivers of their economy. At a recent startup weekend we had in Alexandria, Egypt, of 800 applicants, 200 were women, and 5 of the 24 mentors were successful women entrepreneurs. And in fact, the winning team was led by a woman. We are pleased to note that there is a growing recognition in Saudi Arabia that entrepreneurship can help create jobs. The Saudi government ministers have launched efforts to promote high-tech incubation, provide financing to startup companies, and support women's entrepreneurship. I had the privilege to meet with many of the participants in the emerging Saudi entrepreneurship ecosystem yesterday and was impressed with their commitment to move this initiative forward. We look forward to working and learning from each other's best practices. Entrepreneurship is a win-win for any economy, and we welcome your collaboration. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists ideas on this important issue and to a productive discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks very much to Lorraine Harriton for being with us today. Your comments regarding women entrepreneurs reminded me that Chairman Mao Zedong in China, there were many things that Chairman Mao got a little bit wrong, but one thing that he said is probably the most frequently quoted Maoism, if you like, these days, and that is that women hold up half the sky. And in China, it's absolutely true that women hold up half the sky. You're absolutely right, I think, Lorraine, that no nation, no society can afford to leave half of its population at any kind of disadvantage. And we thank the Secretary of State for her championing of that cause. So our next speaker is Jim Clifton, and Jim has been the CEO of Gallup since 1988. It's a very interesting story. Jim was running a market research company in Nebraska at the time that the Gallup organization, a very celebrated brand name in market research, came a little bit unstuck. The Gallup family was not doing too well financially, and Jim stepped in and made an offer for Gallup, and ever since then, in 1988, Gallup's revenues have increased by 15-fold over where they were, if I've got that right, in 88, 23 years ago. So here's a really outstanding entrepreneur who's taken a struggling but reputed brand and turned it into a great global powerhouse. And we really appreciate you being with us, Jim, and please come up and share your insights. Thank you.
Well, John, thank you. I've done something very dangerous. I listened to the panel before, then I listened here, and I just changed everything I was going to say. So if there are times where I look like I'm lost, that's because I am. Let me make just kind of a couple of reckless remarks, and then John will go to the panel. As he was saying, I've had this same job I've had the same job kind of my whole life. Our company was founded by Dr. George Gallup 75 years ago, but he had a question where he was always kind of roaming the hills of the world trying to figure out what the will of the world is. Because he was an American, he called it the Great American Dream. But over the last 50 years, the Great American Dream has been to have peace, to have a family, to pray to the God they want to, some kind of freedom. That's been the will of the United States of America. Recently, it changed in the last 10 years to having a good job. That might seem like a very subtle shift to you. It changes everything. It changes when you get married, changes if you ever get married, changes how many kids you have, changes if you have any kids at all. But here's the most important thing, and I think this might be the biggest observation we've made in billions of pieces of data from around the world. The great global dream now is to have a good job. And so it changes again, birth rates, it changes marriage, it changes values. So you say, well, what about my religion? What about family and all that? They're real important, but they're now getting trumped by jobs. And it even changes migration patterns. So right now, 7 billion people, about 1 billion of them say they want to get out of their countries permanently. Well, guess why? It's because they're looking for a different job. They don't get married as soon as they did. That's because of a job. But if you and I were walking down any street in the world, from Kansas City to Khartoum to London or Beirut, wherever it might be, and you said, what's on the mind of these people? Just your best guess is they're thinking about something that has to do with their job. But there's all of you lead something in this room. But what it means is every decision you make, every strategy that you make has to have something to do with that person's job, because that's their new relationship to the world. Okay, that's one thing. So Gallup measured this. There are 7 billion people in the world, 5 billion adults. Of the 5 billion adults, 3 billion of them said to us they wish they had a good job. That's the great global dream. A good job we defined as 30 plus hours a week, an organization with 2 or more people, and a paycheck that's consistent. That's what we called a good job. Then we counted how many there are in the world. There's only 1.2 billion. So we have a shortfall of about 1.8. I'm going to call it 1.5 billion because there's about 300 million that kind of want part-time or whatever. So we just Gallup put a book together recently, and we called it The Coming Jobs War. War is kind of a strong term, but if you look at the pace of people trying to move around the world, migration patterns, all those things, is growing so fast, it's going to truly be a war for jobs. And it's probably just been starting. Now, it's been going on for at least a decade, but it's growing slowly and then quickly. By the way, if you said, what does Gallup see as far as 7 billion people? Are they thriving? Are they doing better as mankind? No, actually, suffering's going up. The reason that suffering's going up is because the number of people that wish they had a good job is going up. And anyway, the reason I wanted to tell you that is I was sitting out here watching, and I was thinking, I wonder why we're all here working on this subject. And I think it's because as leaders, we're trying to respond to a whole different will or a whole different need that people have. Okay, that's the first thing. This is the reckless part. I think that what we all chose as a solution was innovation. God, how many innovation conferences have all of you been going to over the last 5 years? You know, if there's one more innovation conference in Washington, D.C. or New York, I'm gonna go nuts. But do you know what's been coming out of them? No jobs at all. You've got to be open to the fact that as a civilization of leaders, we all took the wrong fork in the road. We have a gross oversupply of innovation. That's a big problem. But here's the biggest thing. We had the wrong expectation for it. So we say, oh, we don't have enough jobs in Detroit. Well, then we better build a big innovation center. We don't have any real jobs in Saudi Arabia. Let's build a whole innovation city. Well, somebody's either very right or very wrong. Here's the thing that we didn't consider. Innovation has no value whatsoever until a customer is standing next to it. I don't think anybody in the world had that figured out. There's a couple of reasons. One thing is that innovation has to do, the roots of that is in intellectual development. And as a civilization of people, we are really good at intellectual development. You can take a whole bunch of kids, smart kids, put them in the best schools, then put them in the best laboratories, and they'll invent a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't have any customers and doesn't have any value. And that's exactly what we've been doing. The science that actually creates a customer, a business model, and then revenue, and then jobs, we've always left, as one of our speakers was saying, I don't know if it was you, Len, or somebody else, but we've left that more to chance. But we don't understand it. So then we just go right back to the capital, whatever capital is. We say, we need $5 billion because we got to spend more on innovation. And because we know intellectual development, I think it's called a hammer and a nail. But everything looks like a nail to us, so we go and just keep hammering on innovation. This is my theory. Right now, there's $60 trillion of GDP in the world. So that's economic energy, 60 trillion. I averaged who I thought were the best economists in the world, where they said the economy would be in 30 years. I think this is a real important number. I threw the outliers out. The economy is going to go from 60 trillion to 200 trillion, the global economy. So what it means is $140 trillion of new securities, of stock, of sales, of jobs, but of customers is going to reign, the god of jobs is going to reign $140 trillion of new stuff on the world. But then whoever gets that are the people that are going to have jobs. I want to just end this with one more sort of reckless remark here, John, then maybe you'll have some questions. There's about 6 million companies in the United States. There's about 6 million in Europe. There's only about 25 million in the whole world. Here's something that you have to know. And no administration, no government in the world knows this, especially in Washington, D.C. But when those 25 million CEOs get up, I'm one of them, not one of us is thinking about creating a job. That's not what we're doing. Yet we create legislation and we create incentives to try to get us to create a job. Not one CEO and 25 million around the world are trying to create. You know what we are trying to create? We are trying to create customers. And we've got it backwards. We think that we make policies and legislations and leadership strategies to create jobs and then somehow customers follow. Unless you get that two-step algorithm changed, I think we'll just keep spending more money, having the wrong expectations for innovation, and mankind won't develop like we desperately need to right now. Thank you. That concludes my remarks.
All right, thanks very much, Jim. I think, let me just ask our two panelists a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up. I think on the Lorraine, one of the things that you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, was part of the program. It's a 6-step program, which starts with identifying entrepreneurs, and then I think the 6th point was celebrating their successes. Right. So, in your work, which of these is the most challenging? If you go through this 6-step model, where's the bottleneck? Where's the key challenge? And particularly for this region, you've done some work, as you said, in North Africa, also in Palestine. For this region, which do you think is the principal challenge, and how can it be overcome?
Well, first I'd like to say that we're talking about building an ecosystem, and all those elements are important to work together. And they need to be built up from a grassroots effort and from the combination of involvement from, all parts of society, whether it's businesses, private sector, government, the academic institutions, NGOs, all play a part in building that ecosystem. So I don't know if I could say that one is more important than the other, but I would say for this region, it's a cultural change is the most difficult. And there's a panel later on failure. I mean, having people understand that failure is an okay thing as long as you fast fail and you learn from your mistakes and you move on. Also changing some of the regulatory environment so that bankruptcy is not something that you can't recover from is an important aspect of this. But really culture is really probably the hardest thing to make change to over time. And that's one reason why we're trying to celebrate some of the successes. Maktouk, that was mentioned earlier, was a great success in Egypt, but I have to say that it's sometimes difficult to find those successes right now. It's going to take time to have those great exits, to build there's lots of wonderful young entrepreneurs that I've met along the way that really have great ideas and great enthusiasm and great passion. But we need to help them along by building that ecosystem around them so they can be successful. If Steve Jobs had been born in Egypt, I'm not sure there'd be a great book written about him right now.
So if the culture change element is the toughest part of the equation, how can an individual who wants to be an entrepreneur break through that? Isn't that a very, very formidable challenge and one that any individual can't really deal with unless, of course, they're blessed with, tremendous energy or innovative insight?
Well, as someone famous once said, it takes a small group of people, if one person changed the world. In fact, that's the only way it ever happens. So I think that what we need, and I know there's a lot of people in this region that I've met personally that are trying to break through and make that happen, and there's a lot of help along the way. The world is much smaller now, and the world is available on your palm, and people know what's going on around the world. So that change is happening. It's changing extremely rapidly, and there's going to be a Steve Jobs coming out of this region probably in the next 5 years, I would bet. Okay. I'm wondering, Jim, turning to you for a moment, if there are 1 billion people who want to get out of their countries to find a good job somewhere else, is creating a more entrepreneurship-friendly environment in all of the countries of the world, if we were able to do that with Lorraine's efforts and other such efforts, would that mitigate the problem? Would fewer than 1 billion people then want to move because there'd be entrepreneurial opportunities that would be more easily accessible to them in their home countries?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of difference. But by the way, it's real important. You can't really tell if they're going from one country to another. There's enormous variation by city. And so if you think, well, all the different policies or whatever they are in the United States, all the cities should have equal performance. And so you have somebody like Detroit, who was the richest city in the world 40 years ago and now has completely crashed, or anybody that's my age that was in New York 30 years ago, you go to your hotel room, you couldn't go outside at night because it was so dangerous. But there are city leaders, mothers and fathers, that create an image of a city that attract people. So people from India are attracted, thank goodness if you're an American, to Silicon Valley and San Francisco, but they weren't attracted to Kansas City, St. Louis, somewhere else, you see? But I think cities can create an image for entrepreneurs, and they typically have heroes. If you want to trace young people back to where they first formed an idea, heroes plays a big part of it. But I would look with migration patterns more to cities than I would countries.
All right, good.
Can I add to that, though?
Please.
Having spent the last 25 years in Silicon Valley, it used to be that everyone came to Silicon Valley And almost half of the startups are by immigrants, and the Indian population has been very prolific in Silicon Valley. But now they're going back, and there's venture capitalists in Hyderabad and Bangalore, and people aren't, now that the ecosystem has been built up in India, we're seeing changing patterns in where people do entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have in China droves of returning Chinese from the West who are coming back and starting their own businesses and investing in others as well. Let me ask you one other thing, Jim, before we open it up. Corporations, highly competitive conditions, constantly looking at controlling costs, outsourcing, substituting part-time labor for full-time labor. You mentioned 1.2 billion people only have the 30-hour week sustainable job. Are we going to be able to get corporations to commit to making more, quote, good jobs by your definition? Or is global competition just going to forever prevent that from happening, no matter how much goodwill as a CEO you might have and commitment to doing good in that
John,
regard?
I think it's another place where leaders are just making a horrible mistake. I mean, grossly misreading the tea leaves. If you take, in Europe, there are 6 million companies. There's also 6 million in the United States. But there are 6 million with people between 0 to 100. There's only 80,000 between 100 and 500. And then there's only 18,000, see how small it gets so fast, between 500 and 10,000. There's only 1,000 companies in the United States and 1,000 in Europe that have 10,000 employees or more. And so when you hear leaders talking about, well, big business this, there aren't any. When you see these big businesses up here, but the main way they grow is by acquiring their competitors and then cutting. When Jack Welch was at GE, I think he acquired over 1,000 companies. There's no organic growth there at all. That's not entrepreneurship, that's business. Now, do you want that? It's a real important animal in the jungle because most of the small businesses have them as clients. But if you try to imagine that there's going to be growth there, it's not. That's not how they do business. And they're always looking to cut. But the 6 million are always replacing themselves. So in Europe or the United States, if you're going to fix either one of them, 1 million new businesses need to start in the United States and Europe in 2012, or hell is coming. Now, both of them have only about 400,000 apiece starting up. So it's a huge, huge shortfall. But if you're going to fix something, you've got to fix the startup. And remember, and at least half, depending upon which data you use, they're going to fail, but that's just the way it looks. But we have to have strategies on the startups. I call them the shoot-ups, not the big business. Big business, what they're doing is the right thing. We want all that, but it's the wrong place to make a strategy. I want to say one other thing, too. If you take the 6 million, this is really interesting to me, but 75% of them have no interest in growth. No interest at all in growth. They're only there because of freedom, a demand to be able to choose the day they want themselves, the things they do all day. Only 25% of them actually want to shoot up. So any kind of strategy that you have, don't put them out over. There's probably about 1 million here in Saudi Arabia. So that means there's going to be about 250,000 that are really anxious to grow. All of your systems have to be aimed at that, not at the ones that are especially after freedom. I don't know if I answered the question or not.
Terrific. Final quick question. You're doing market research all over the world with people, as you said, consumers, citizens, on how they view a good job. Can you give us any sense of variation, say compare the United States with Western Europe or with China? How do people in different cultures and environments define what a good job is?
Well, if you have, there's really 100 million good jobs in the United States. Of that 100 million, 30 million of them, 30%, are really engaged in their job, which is pretty good. Then you have 20 million people that are just miserable, awful employees. Then you got about 50 million in the middle that just don't care. They're, lining up smoking breaks or something like that. But what we have found is that if you can take 30% of your own workforce and raise it to 50%, you'll get organic growth. But when we look at it nationally, John, there are some countries, I'll pick on two, China and Russia, that they have very poor relationships with their people. And what it looks to us like from our data digging, it's that Chinese and Russians tend to name the wrong people boss. That sounds so simple and functional. But the problem with that is that good companies pop out a lot of small businesses. So at Gallup, we're very proud of this, but 100 companies have come out of Gallup. I don't know how many have come out of Google or how many have come out of Groupon. But if you have a real low energy, lousy workforce, countries don't create, they don't have organic job growth, which is obviously what we all need.
Okay, well, as the CEO of the #1 business school in China, I think I'm not going to ask you any more questions after you suggested they might have chosen
The ones that you
the wrong
work with
person.
are fine.
Okay, fine. All right, so let's get some questions. We've got about 16 minutes left, so let's see if we can identify a few people here. The gentleman, yes, 2 tables back here first, please. Can we get a microphone down the front here, someone? Okay, put on your jogging shoes, yeah, over here. Can you put your hand up again, sir? Thank you. Keep it brief if you could.
Hello, sir. My name is Tamar Ghamdi. My question for Mr. Clifton is about creating a good job that have 30 hours per week. That will make companies, like not in private sector, let's say in government, to make it more productive. They have 40 hours per week, period. So creating it to be more 30 hours per week will make it harder to make it more productivity. Have the good productivity to gain new content, gain new ideas in this 30 hours. How can you make this idea applicable, let's say in the third world country here?
Okay, great question. Not just the hours worked, but the productivity and motivation.
Well, we found three questions that if you ask anybody in the world, it changes your relationship to your job from a good job to a great job. So a good job is just that I've got work and a paycheck. A great job is where I define my life by it. I like the mission and purpose of my job, and I go in and I'm really valuable. These 3 questions. One is, my manager or supervisor cares about my development. Sounds simple. That one, you can predict almost everything from the relationship a person has with their boss. You say, what kind of relationship should they have? It's where they care about their development. Not that they're lenient, not that they give, it's that they care about their development. Second one is, at work, my opinion seems to count. If you think your opinion doesn't count, it's not good. And that's the same way in societies and everything else. That's a big sociological shift in the whole world. The other one is, at work I have a chance to do what I do best. That was the way we had to ask it. What's really cruel is when a manager asks you to perform a task you don't have a capacity to perform, and then keeps working you over and over and over. But if a manager can provide you those 3 things, you have predictably a very different life than everybody else. By the way, I'll quantify that for you. Globally, somewhere between only 10 and 15% experience that. So that means that you're under 200 million and the whole workforce are actually managed well. And if you said, where could I get organic growth in Saudi Arabia or Argentina or Mexico or anywhere, if people would manage those employees better, exactly what you're saying is right. You'll get more ideas, you'll get more customers, and all good things will happen. But the sweet spot in this whole moment of human development that we're all looking for, I think lies right within your question.
Excellent. All right, next question. Anyone in the ladies section?
Yeah, Dr. Suzanne Al-Qurashi, King Abdulaziz University. My question to Lorraine, how to encourage entrepreneurship between Saudi women, taking in consideration Saudi culture? Thank you.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
Increasing entrepreneurship in Saudi Arabia for women.
Well, I think there's tremendous opportunity for women entrepreneurs in Saudi Arabia. In fact, we were at the Centennial Fund yesterday, and they said that 20% of their investments were for women entrepreneurs. And I certainly think that that's just the beginning. And I think there's support by the government and support. And I think if we work on building the ecosystems to support women are in Saudi are very passionate, and I think we'll see a lot more than that. So I think 20% is a great number, but just a starting point.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on that from your research, Jim, in terms of jobs for women as opposed to jobs for men? Do you cut your data that way?
No, we don't. We don't see any. We've interviewed so many millions of people. We don't see any difference at all in talent between men and women. Again, that seems simple. Actually, if you, as far as entrepreneurship, the distribution of people that have a higher propensity or higher probability to be an entrepreneur between men and women is the same. By the way, as far as managing people, women have probably just a little more talent than men. Not enough where you choose the women over the man, but just if you just want a real subtle difference. But no, if the conditions and the environment are the same, the storms should be the same between men and women.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please. Anyone else have a question for, yes, please. We'll take the gentleman in the center. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. My name is Mohammed. My question is to Mr. Jim. I just don't see the relation between having less qualified people. I mean, still people are fighting to get talent people with them in the companies, and having a lot of people jobless. And the second point is still to recruit people, it's very expensive. I'm talking about more of talent people again. I hope the question is clear, or?
Well, can you repeat the first part?
Yeah.
I didn't understand the question part of the.
So the question is, on one hand, there is a jobs war, and on the other hand, it's very difficult to find talent people to recruit in companies.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's just, I want to understand the relation between the two. Yeah. And the second one is, since it's very difficult to find, or it's difficult to find talent people, it's also expensive to recruit them. So they cost a lot of money if you look at the executives or in any company.
I understand what you said. I'm not sure I know.
Let me just try. I think, you know, there is I think what perhaps he's saying is that, yes, at the senior end or at the higher skills end of the spectrum, you know, there is no shortage of competition for talent around the world. But we have this very large mass of people who are unemployed, many of whom have actually gone to university and may have degrees even, but cannot get employment. And what do we do about that group? I think that's an issue that's also becoming more relevant in the United States, where structural unemployment looks as though it may tick up a couple of percentage points if we're not careful. Maybe Lorraine, you could have a go at this.
Yeah, I think, in fact, in my conversations yesterday, this came up in some of the dialogues. Even entrepreneurs who are looking to hire people into their businesses have that mismatch. There's a lot that needs to be done to change the education system in this country and around the world. The world is changing very rapidly, and this needs to be updated. And I think there's a lot of focus on doing that. One of the initiatives that we have at the State Department is focused on education for employment and vocational education, and changing the mix in how we train people so that they really can come into their jobs ready. If you look at a lot of the recent college graduates, they just have not been trained with the skills to really be ready to employ in the way that people want to, and that's why we have some of these issues right now.
Okay. Any other question? Either yes, there's a question from the ladies section. I see. Thank you.
Hello, Habiba Larakia. I have a question regarding the three defining questions for a great job. Yeah, I think you mentioned this is low around the world, but did you find any specific success models? Were they highest in any particular sectors or regions around the world?
Oh, I'm just going to say no. Again, I don't know if this is interesting or not, but you can map an individual's well-being in the world better to whom their manager is than anything else. So if you just had a group of 1,000 workers and you said, how high is their well-being? Are they having a great life? I wouldn't map it to industry. I wouldn't even map it to their own company. I just want to know about their manager. So we see more variation with managers than we do with countries or with companies or with industries.
One thing you said, Jim, which may be worth a little bit more clarification, was too much talk about innovation as being the solution to the jobs problem. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit further? And if it's not innovation, what is it that's going to solve the problem in your view?
Well, if you have 1,000 college kids or 1,000 kids graduating from high school, and you have an educational psychologist come in, or a group of them, and say rank order them by IQ, those educational psychologists will rank order them 1 to 1,000, smartest to dumbest, and they will all agree. Because there's something about intellectual strength, and are you born with it or you're made with it? I don't know, but almost all civilizations in the world can really find the smart ones. And then what we do is we take that very top 1/10%, we send them to Stanford or MIT or INSEAD or wherever it is, and we develop their intellectual talent more, and then they go on to NASA or somewhere. We are just really good at that. And so where we are in 2012, if you give us a little kid or a fifth grader, we know how to max out that intellectual talent. Now, if you take the same 1,000, this is as clear as I can state the problem, and Len, you and I disagree a little bit on this, I noticed when you were talking. If you take the same 1,000 and say, line them up by their ability to create a customer, line them up by their ability as an entrepreneur, line them up with their ability to have those moments where they've failed, and actually then feeling like they got knocked down, but a governor in their body creates more determination, then not a single educational psychologist in the world can help you. So you see, but that's the talent or the gift that we need more than anything else, but we just don't understand it very well, and that's why I think it's really great that this group's getting together here, because somebody's got to figure that out, or innovation is not going to pull us out of this.
I'd like to add to that. I've done a lot of work recently with Russia. Now, Russia has tremendous R&D capability, but doesn't really have as good an understanding of how to commercialize, because it hasn't worked in a market-driven economy. So looking at the different areas of what we need to do to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem has to do with how do we work on the commercialization capabilities, how do we build entrepreneurial skill sets into how people think about it, how do they think about the customer. But I think there's a tremendous opportunity in this region and in a lot of the developing regions, because this is where the customers are going to be. A good example I think is in Africa. In Africa it's being transformed by the cell phone. And there's an emerging middle class that's starting to happen in this region and in Africa and around the world. And those are going to be the markets of the future. And the people who are closest to understanding those customers are going to be building the big businesses of the future.
John, one of the most interesting stories to me is that the guy that invented the internet's name is Vint Cerf. He just walks around. Probably a lot of you know him. But he had invented that in the Defense Department and just had the thing there. And so he had his own internet. He got He got the packets to fly across, lines, and that was it. But so here's this unbelievable innovation that changed mankind, maybe more than flight or more than the transistor or anything else. And there's your innovation. A guy came over from the U.S. Senate. I know this story's true because Vint Cerf told me. Not somebody else that's trying to promote themselves. Guy came over from the U.S. Senate and said, "I heard what you made, let me see it." And Cerf showed it to him. And he said, "Oh my gosh, we should throw this out into commerce and see what entrepreneurs would do with it and let them commercialize it." Vint Cerf told me this at dinner. He said back to that senator, "It's fine with me, but I don't see what value businesses would have for it." That's a conversation about the internet. By the way, the senator, do you know who it is?
Jerry Rockefeller.
Huh? It's Al Gore. I always say that's what he should have gotten a Nobel Prize for, that, rather than the other. But anyway.
But it does highlight that, governments can play a very big role in creating platforms for innovation. The internet is a very good example of that. There was a lot of R&D that the U.S. government put into the internet that then became available for commercialization, and they did make it an open platform that it allowed a lot of innovation around it.
But it makes you wonder how many other inventions that might be in in our government, somebody else's government, but doesn't have any customers that could maybe create the next big run.
But having the right commercialization capabilities coming out of the universities, out of government, so that I think this is one thing that Silicon Valley's done extremely well, is to make those linkages so that you can license out the technologies and people can go into the commercial sector and have that stream of innovation to commercialization.
Okay. Sounds like you and Jim are just hitting it off, and you're going to go to lunch and continue the dialogue, right? I'm not even needed here. All right, listen, let's thank Lorraine and Jim for coming and sharing their thoughts, and we're right on time. Thank you.